The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. This is Derek Krebs with the MSX Group, and welcome to today's presentation on Prospero, which is the application most of you probably are well aware of that does the financial reporting and budgeting to bring the easy button to those processes. So welcome one and all. I just have a couple of slides to introduce myself and the topics of the day. Otherwise, we're going to have some fun looking at the product along with some great tips and tricks you can utilize for your own little deployments of Prospero. So again, thanks for joining us today. Let me continue inside the PowerPoint for just a moment. Again, my name's Derek Krebs. I'll have you jot down my email address in case you have any follow-up questions from today, and including on today's session, we're going to have some nice little question and answers. So I'll have you leverage the GoToWebinar control panel there to your right. One thing, if it's ever blocking your view, you'll have some little arrows, orange arrow pointing to the left or right that minimizes and maximizes that control panel. And then also you'll see a questions area. So everybody's currently on mute, but please take advantage of that. And there might be questions I'll definitely address on today's phone call, but if it gets any very specific questions, we'll maybe field those offline. So again, welcome. To more formally introduce myself, my name is Derek Krebs. I'm a senior consultant with the MSX Group, and I've been doing this for many, many years, going on 27 years. I've been 100% devoted to financial reporting and budgeting. Those first 15 years, most of our team members at MSX Group, we worked at Microsoft, and even before that, at a private company called FRX Software. We had such great reporting and budgeting tools that Microsoft acquired us, and then as they spun off, we are then 12 years ago underneath our own umbrella, thankfully, where we have now product control and development underneath our umbrella again. So it's nice to have these new features and functionalities come to you sooner and faster in one program and process instead of two historically, because today's focus is going to be the reporting side. But I have a session later today on the budgeting, so I'll maybe make a few remarks on both of those key concepts today. All right, and within the 7 cool reports, that's today's key topic and focus here. So let me just jump right to some of the bullet points of the reports we'll be looking at. First and foremost, what we're going to be doing is leveraging our drill down viewers electronically. That way it's real-time data. It's secure, it's electronic. That way it does not get in the wrong hands at the wrong time. And then also electronically inside our viewer or workspace, we can do several things. We can interact with the report, like drill down to account and transaction level, doing some graphical analysis of the data, adding memos or notes. We can export it out to Excel or PDF as need be, and also be able to change the drill order. And then along with some of the most common reports that I see that most organizations have and that I favor would be a nice trended report. So I'll show you 2 methods of doing a rolling 12-month report, either looking at just the fiscal months of the year or always 12-month, regardless of whatever month you're in. Or the third report, a lot of times I want to see how I'm doing based on sales data. And I could also, like percent of sales, how much is my cost of goods sold, how much is my salaries to sales, etc. So Prospero has a great data warehouse that obviously will store your general ledger data, actuals primarily. It also can store budgets, as you'll probably hear and see some other future sessions focus on the budgeting side, and statistics, both actual and budget, like units sold, head count. So do leverage that product ability to load statistics to do more robust key performance indicator reporting. Fourth report we'll look to will be a nice little side-by-side comparative report where I can see my location or companies in my column on one screen report most efficiently. Then the fifth item, we're going to look at trying to produce usually some board packages or month-end reports efficiently using what's called a report collection. And then the 6th and 7th report, we're also going to look to key concepts of what we call summary departments and accounts, where we have the ability to expand those to avoid and reduce report maintenance, like as a new general ledger revenue expense get added. A lot of times I can avoid all of the painful setup that you might have done in some past Microsoft or other products. And then additionally, a statement of cash report. A lot of people are doing some processes or reports manually, I still see in this day and age. So we're always going to see how we can automate that. So that cash flow report will be one further example to that. All right, I'll be sure to send an email thank you. I'll be passing along this little PowerPoint, but it's a little bit more summarized. So in addition, we're going to have this recording that we're going to broadcast out on our website. So we're going to have a great little library of material, including this session out there that you can later review or even share with your coworkers. All right, so that's my lead-in, and we're done with PowerPoint. I'm now going to move right into the application, looking at one of the very first key concepts of our report, drill down and drill order and trended reports, those first two there in the background. As I do launch Prospero, I have a couple of sessions open. One would be, how about a CFO? How about every morning? I like to open up Prospero. I like to look at a report collection of, let's say, 4 reports, like those two to the left might be in report form or view. But how about the 2 reports to the right in a graphical view, as I'm going to again show you now some visual context to some of those agenda items here. And that simply is again a report collection. And we have the ability on the window tab here to either show tabs, which normally I leave it at grouping tabs, but how I'm producing this sort of dashboard look and feel is I'm choosing no tabs there at the top, and I'm just really just showing my windows side by side vertically or horizontally, which is easily done inside this little window area where I can monitor the different windows I have open and even tile them side by side if I'm ever multitasking or comparing data side by side. So there at least is the punchline or behind the scenes on that view. All right, I'm going to move away from that. I'm going to call that my CFO dashboard or report collection. Then secondly, I have a session of Prospero logged in as a power user that I see, like most of you, I'm familiar with your organizations and names over time, that you might be in the finance and accounting area, editing, creating, and running these reports. Or how about the third and final persona that I'm even going to start with is maybe an end user perspective. And let's now role play that I'm an organization of 100 people. I have 20 managers that I like them to see reports efficiently. They normally log into the tool. When they do launch Prospero, either it's a client program on my computer or maybe IT has some central server or Citrix desktop I utilize, or even this could be web deployed, as I'm just, again, sharing with you some easy ways to get this into the hands of your different users, again, securely, electronically, with all the bells and whistles I described earlier, like drill down, order, graphs, etc. Now let's take a look at this quick launch, and you can easily customize what you see in this quick launch. There's a button here because there might be some favorite reports you might have. You just turn this off, and then what you're seeing now in this little pick list of reports is what we call report visibility. Now, in reality, I have about 50 reports inside our demonstration database, but this user only has visibility to these 4. And that'll be some little notes that I'm going to add to in today's session on easy security by accountants for accountants, where we do not need IT's assistance on that. And I was just showing you little favorites to reports that a user might have access to, or additionally the report collection, like that CFO little glimpse I just showed you, or third and finally, it might be that time of the year where you want me, the budgeter or manager, to enter data. And let me even start with this very first report generically, this favorable versus unfavorable income statement. Now, security related, now this is always the trainer or consultant in me. We spoke of earlier what's called visibility, like which reports they have access to. And then additionally, we have visibility of our budget versions, because I might have 2 budget versions, best case and worst case. Maybe my users only have access to a certain budget version. Once again, visibility being the key word or concept behind what they see report-wise or budget version-wise. Second key concept in security is what we call assignments. Now, for the location, this user only has access to the Denver location. And then this little pick list now reminds us that. And now let me also take a moment to further familiarize ourselves with the demonstration structure of our chart of accounts. Well, first and foremost, top down, we're in a multi-company environment. And this user only has assignments or access to company one, just like we saw for the location only Denver. But in reality, we have multi-company. And that's what's great about Prospero. I could rattle off about 20 awesome features about it. It automatically does the consolidation. There's a tree called all that's automatically created and maintained. Now, speaking of that last phrase, looking at the department segment, that's our third additional segment. And really, company, let me clarify, that's not, company is not a segment in our general ledger, but we create that as sort of what we call a virtual segment to easily toggle and roll up maybe the multi-company any of you might have. Continuing with that phrase regarding the all summary note of a tree, I'm now showing you a list of all the different departments. Posting level is what you post and store inside the general ledger. But here is a summary level, and I have a great button if I wanted to see it in a list view currently, or I can come up here and see it in a graphical tree form. And out of the box, I do not have to do anything. This all tree automatically gets created and automatically gets maintained. And then even we'll have a few little remarks regarding trees we even easily can create and accomplish. And part of my remarks are going to be multifaceted. I see a couple of brand new beginning users, some veteran experienced users. So I'll try to meet the best of all of those people's worlds here, of some basic concepts and a little bit more intermediate ones there, but they're all easy when we peel back the onion. All right, so I'm now really opening up this report for all the departments for the Denver location that I have security assignments for. And also I want to emphasize I'm in what's called the published report area, because maybe taking one step back, I might be the accountant that I run one simple report collection of, let's call it 4 reports. I run that report collection with one click and I publish it out. And that way, based on, again, visibility and assignments, it's super easy and automated in that regard. Now, within this published report I'm now viewing, I even can archive old reports. As you see, some folder structure here and maybe some different months within. So you can scheme up these folders within the published report area in any fashion you prefer. And then when I was at the quick launch area, I opened up this report, and what that did is it opened up the last published report, so I don't have to hunt and peck for it. And now as I continue with this budget versus actual report, obviously I'll probably focus on actuals, but obviously Prospero gives us great budgeting ability to avoid Excel hell. And how about some of those earlier bullet points I regarded, like graphing the report data, drilling down to the account and transaction data, adding financial footnotes to it, changing the drill order. I'm going to now segue to those in case you are not familiar with those keystrokes. Now, this sales data, when I drill in, remember, I only had one company, the United States company, even though we're multi, and only had one location, Denver. So now when I drill into the sales, I perhaps might be looking at the different departments that have data, like these two for sales and marketing. I can continue going further. If I ran the report for account and transaction level, I even can go down to that transaction level. And what you're additionally seeing we did not see on the earlier account level, or even the very first level, we call that the financial level, or the second level I drilled in for sales is the account level. And then third and finally, I have the transaction level, where you can also see what is called the vendor and customer information on your report. And for legal reasons, we sort of left that blank here, but you would see in your databases such information. And how about, before I forget that key concept on this column design, let me then show you the punchline behind the scenes of that report I just quoted. So I'm now logged in as a power user, that I then get to see the structure of this report, like what line or column are being utilized. And then as I open up this column definition, we simply have what is called a detail column type. Like first and foremost, we have balances that either are going to grab actuals or budgets, either that you have those budgets in the general ledger, or I'd say most Prospero customers leverage the budgeting ability to avoid Excel hell. But there's an example of actual or budget, or calculated columns like variances, actual to budget, this year, last year, and then also we'll look at percent of sales in just a moment. And then finally, let me emphasize and conclude at least with We can also add a detail column type. And when doing so, it adds this additional field where I can then choose some additional transactional detail fields from my general ledger here. Now, we have in our database, and one thing even I maybe caught myself in here, normally I would see different transactional fields within this database pick list. And my apology for not maybe testing this earlier, but normally I'd see maybe about 15 different fields here that I could choose from transaction detail from my system here, like vendor, customer information, posting date, journal entry number, etc. So detail column being the key concept, as I'm now sort of logged in as a generic database currently. So sorry I was not able to show that final field though. Now as I return back to that completed report, I drilled into the transaction level. As I go back a level, my first click was going down to the departmental level. Now, since this user has limited access, I could come up here and change the report prompt. Instead of looking at all departments and drilling in like I did for sales, I might want to look at a single and specific department. So here in my little access list here, I'm then just going to come up and choose a single specific department. Like how about here, instead of the graphical view, maybe I wanted to see corporate or retail. So by all means, I can easily toggle between the departments or even drill down from the top down. And that actually did not have data, but maybe the admin or 200 department I could also see data for. And for time's sake, I'll probably continue. Another visual cue here is I've added for my manager, or maybe you, the CFO, reviewing my financial, you've asked all of the managers to explain variances because, well, here Derek has a pretty large variance here. And what I did was easily added through a right click, or you see the icon to the left for the annotate, which is also above in the toolbar. I can add some nice little financial footnotes to my general ledger data. Well, I'm currently adding a second note, but let's even review the one here to the right because Derek, I'm logged in as manager 1 currently. I added a note for this account, and even that you could be my boss said, yeah, Derek and I spoke, and this is our course of action. That way, then anybody later then reviewing this memo or note could see the little dialogue and rationale behind that data without having to hunt down separate emails or documents. And that again is our annotation through a right clicker on the toolbar. At any time as well, I can display this data graphically. Super easy. We have about maybe 10 different graph types. I do not have to buy any third-party product. I do not have to be an Excel guru, which I'm a novice, very novice at Excel graphs, so I'm glad this does that automatically. These are also interactive drill downable charts. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drill into, let's say, one of these pie nodes, and this is the next level down. Over here to the right, my legend, which I also could put at the bottom here if I want here on some of my options tab. I'll at least call your attention to some of the layout buttons here in option that are within now this chart tab that's getting enabled since I am viewing a chart. Now, when I drilled into that data, yeah, graphical picture speaks 1,000 words is awesome, but what I might also want to do is I might want to see it in the normal report view. So on the toolbar icon, I'm going to switch to the report view. Now, basically, this is my revenue, net revenue I drilled into, still broken out by the different departments, but more in what I call a report view or tabular view. I could send this out to Excel efficiently. I'm going to keep the same file name and path as you currently see here. And I'm going to call that a one-dimensional Excel file, meaning just one single sheet. I even can export formulas out based on any other ad hoc analysis or processes you might want with that data. And then additionally, let me even just show you an example of a three-dimensional output. And actually, I'm going to show you maybe 2 different examples of maybe some other reports sent out to Excel. One might be looking at the different departments. I toggle between 1 or 2 different ones. I've just now exported multiple reports or departments out to Excel. I call that maybe a 3-dimensional type where you see sheet 1 or department A, B, C as I'm currently showing you. Or how about finally, let's go to maybe my banker. Every quarter, my banker or board member might want to see 3 reports. So here's another example of a report collection which now is 3 reports in the report collection, like income statement report 1, or balance sheet report number 2, or cash flow report number 3. And let me segue to show you that. Inside my administrative session, we have the key concept here, what is called report collections. I'll pull up here what's called month end, as I can have multiple different ones for different audiences or collections of reports. And then here is report 1, 2, 3, like we're looking at in Excel. And I have the add or remove button, and then it just asks me for the different reports, either in folder form or turning this off more in a true list form by numeric or alpha name of the report I could add. All right, so super easy, just adding reports multiple here on this one tab. And then the other final key concept of report collections is on the output tab. Well, looking at this option here, when I first logged in, we looked at the publish reports area as the end user. So maybe you might prefer to output those to the publish report area for those users that do have a Prospero login that sees their reports electronically with all the advantages. But my other example was maybe sending this report collection out to Excel. And whenever I choose Excel, or I could have chosen PDF, I sort of call that an offline, not secure file, then I have the option within Excel or PDF if I want these multiple reports to be in a single file, or I can turn it off. And if I had then 3 reports, it would be 3 separate files. But usually most turn on this little check mark to have it all being contained within one file. And I like to just go back full circle to where I began, report 1, 2, or 3, easy report collection. All right, let me now circle back to a couple of the key concepts we saw briefly earlier. One was graphing report data. So I'm going to now take one step back on this one income statement that allowed our end users or myself to graphically analyze and drill in. We have this chart tab. All you have to do is turn on this little check mark to allow the chart view. Here's those different graph types available to us. And probably the final note I'll make in that regard is there might be instances of certain columns, like how about I have a rolling 12-month that I'm about ready to segue to, but I have a year-to-date column. Maybe I do not want that year-to-date column to be graphed, otherwise it might skew all my monthly analysis. So if ever you're graphing reports, we have in the column I'll start with, and then secondly in the line set, we have the ability to suppress data on a graph. Because when I saw the report in report view or tabular form, we saw all these columns including variances, but then when I looked at the graph, we did not see these $% variances because maybe that's not meaningful in my graph. So there is one key field in our column definition if ever you want to suppress on a graph. And then secondly, we have the same thing within our line set. There might be, let's say, a gross margin % row I do not want graphed. So as I highlight this line, that easily allows me to see it here to the right. We have a field here of suppressing on the chart, yay or nay. Otherwise, there's some robust graphical analysis you could do or sharing with your end user. Let me continue. And occasionally what I'm going to do is check within our question queue, see if anything comes through. So I'll plug that to definitely if you have any questions in today's session. Usually I reserve the last 5 to 10 minutes to field them, but occasionally I'll peek at any if there's any pressing questions I can address during the session. All right, let me continue on some other sort of quote-unquote cool reports here. Now, one thing I definitely want to emphasize earlier when I drilled into the report, now I'm running a report for all companies in all locations. Earlier, we're just as an individual user that had a single company or single location. Now, one of my favorite features, and I always love analyzing data instead of processing it, is now when I drill into that same sales line, instead of going now first to the departments of a single Denver location, as we saw earlier, I'm now the CFO, and my first level of drill down analysis is by company, like Company 1 US, Company 2 Europe, elimination. Now, speaking of elimination, Another example of Prospero's very powerful and flexible data warehouse, one would be budget data. Secondly, statistics, actual budget like headcount, units sold, etc. Maybe a third example I've done for customers is, hey, Derek, I have a new company we're acquiring. I don't want to go through the whole general ledger process. Maybe I could then import in their data, or maybe another example, importing maybe into the Prospero data warehouse, maybe elimination data if it's not stored in a general ledger we interface with. And I'd say we have approximately 30 different general ledger systems and versions within different general ledgers that we interface with, and we're continually adding those. So do pick our brain of other manual processes you're currently doing or down the road you anticipate, because I'm sure we can automate those. Now, that was my first click now into company, and I'll do the same thing earlier. Now, my next level is the location, and maybe third level, department. Well, what I can easily and nimbly do is now I'm just looking at just the departments within one location in one company. But maybe I want to see how service is doing across the board, meaning across all companies and departments. So I'm closing that last drill down, which was just into Miami, or I'm closing the locational view. I'm back to my first view of the company. And then finally, the punchline and product feature is changing the drill order. Normally, I predefine for the report my preferred analysis, like top-down, company first, location second, etc. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply drag department to the top, click OK. Now when I drill in, immediately I'm analyzing maybe variances, action budget at the department level. Otherwise, most other competitors or maybe past programs or processes you had, you'd have to have maybe 2, 3, or 4 different reports to accomplish now what usually one report or fewer can do so for us. And then I'm going to rephrase here, changing the drill order. And I mentioned we can predefine this drill order. Now, what account level detail means is I want to see the lowest level of detail immediately with one click. Let me even drag that to the top, just to give you another example before I show you within a report where I predefine my preferred method. Now, with the account detail here at the very top, now when I drill in, there's no subtotling at all. I call that my entire kitchen sink. Sometimes it might be hundreds of rows based on your data size, but you might want that for reports. And then going full circle, at the report itself, where I define my line or column efficiently, let's look now to the Options tab, because here in the lower right is where I can predefine that order. Like maybe I want to have account detail because maybe these are segments in my general ledger I normally do not post to and I normally don't care about. So maybe I'm going to analyze it by these two first, maybe then account detail third, and basically ignores the bottom ones beneath the account detail. All right, so being aware of this little drill order there, and check another cool concept off of my list here. Let me now close a couple of reports out and let me show you trended reports that I always favor, because let's even role play in this year alone. We're in September. Let's say I'm a calendar company. My year runs from January to December, and I want to see how I'm doing throughout the year. So let me just close all reports here. Now, the key concept is I'm going to show you 2 different columns, and let me even just cut to the punchline and chase on that. Well, one column might only show me the months of this fiscal year. So here's an instance where I can hard code in the different months of the year. Now, normally I have in the suppress field, I only like to show those months that I've closed. Or shall I say, suppress means do not display, do not print if the reporting period is greater than my report period. And let me give you a more specific example. I'm going to run this report for period 3 randomly, which means I only want to see 3 months of data because maybe I'm not done and closed with period 4. So I'm just doing a Control R. I'm just copying that to the right. And how about I want to see where this column is used at? Instead of me hunting down a different report, I can over here to the left, I can right mouse click, where is this used? Meaning what reports? Here's various reports we have. I'm just going to open up this one called monthly analysis. And how about here? I'll randomly run it for period 3 of the year. Now here is where I feel me as maybe the CFO or even my manager, I feel shortchanged and let down when I'm viewing this report because I'm only going to see 3 months of data where I'd rather see a full year of trend. Now notice this report is immediately going to the graph view. And on the chart tab, here's one little check mark. You can turn this on to view it by the chart as default. Otherwise, if that's left off, it goes to the report view, and then you just click on the icon to go to the graph. But since I did this second example going immediately to the graph, here's back to the report view, meaning the raw data. All right, and this is obviously a very basic report where I'm only seeing 3 months of data. But there's sort of the key concept where, okay, yeah, I see a trend, but I'd rather see multiple months here. And as I exit away from the report 1 or column 1 that I do not like, where I hard coded in the month or year, I favor this one here to the left where I'm always seeing the last 12 months. Where here, instead of period 1, 2, 3 hard coded, I'm saying look to 11 months ago, 10 months ago, etc. Same type of shortcut. Right click, where's this column used? Various reports here. I can almost open up any one here. Let's open up this one. All right, I'm going to do the same thing. How about let's run this for period 3. And now I have a better analysis of maybe multiple months of areas I'm doing good or bad with. Okay. And the key concept again being the column, because probably the line set is probably a little bit more abbreviated than the last little session here. But then here, if I wanted to display as a chart, I'm seeing the full month of my maybe expense or revenue trend here. Last 12 months of regardless of what month I'm looking at, like March 21, and then display as a chart. All right, looks like someone had that set a little pie graph. Normally it has as a column one. I probably should have ran that beforehand, but there's the key concept of rolling 12-month reports. As I continue, a very other common report is what we call a side-by-side comparison. You saw me toggling between either company 1 or department A, B, and C, which is very great, especially if I have segregated data like a manager seeing only certain more focused data. But now I'm opening up this report, what we call sort of our side-by-side. I usually have a few of these reports in my arsenal where on one page or one view, I'm seeing some data side by side. So I come back here and switch to the report view. There is now either location or department or company 1, company 2, company 3 side by side. Now notice additionally, an extra cool design technique is I'm looking at current period data, but I might be looking at year-to-date cumulative down below. That way I don't have to add maybe twice as many columns here to the right. I'm just doing a little bit more lower in rows, and I still have all the drill down we saw earlier. So I always like to have my reports being a little bit more summarized and leveraging that drill down ability. And let's go to the column design first, and then the line design secondly. So in our column definition, and whenever you create a new column, looking here to the right under the property, I'm actually going to go up here and thumbtack and not auto hide it. And then the toolbar, this little check mark in case you accidentally turn that off ever. I always leave the properties turned on. That way I do not forget about them. And then, yeah, normally I auto hide it thereafter. But normally columns have just the period segment defined in it, meaning like actual budget this year last. Normally all new columns have that defined. However, in this particular column, we're doing a little bit different. We are now emphasizing and turning on department as my focus. It adds this new field. You probably see as I'm now turning it on and off to call your attention to those. And then once I've enabled a filter, like in this case, department, I can then either choose a posting level, or many times I want to choose summary levels. Now this tree graph is not probably the most robust one, meaning it's the default an only tree called all in this segment. But let me show you a second example on our location segment. If you want to have a secondary filter, location I just turned on, here's that row to emphasize. And then here is now, instead of the default all tree, automatically create and maintain, you might want to create it maybe regionally or division based. Like here might be all my Midwest. In my tree, if I have a good chart of accounts, it might be all those that begin with a 4, which is great. That means I never have to update my roll-up tree. I never have to update this column if I refer to Midwest. But if your chart of accounts is not as cleanly numbered, by all means, you can have category beneath it, meaning you can have ranges, wildcards, individuals, etc., or even exclusions when working with trees. And that'll probably be a separate session we'll emphasize trees on, but there's a little summary and second example of trees. All right, great. There's my side-by-side report. I could have also done company to not shortchange, that being also a very common one for those that are multi-company that I see on this call. All right, let me now segue away from that side-by-side report, but awesome. I at least like to have a couple of those reports if you don't already have so. Let me now transition to what we call our percent of sales column, where I might want to analyze all my revenue expenses by a certain base denominator, like sales or other that you define. So I'm going to come here under Window Close All, and that's such a common keystroke that I do all the time. I like to come up here and add that to my quick access toolbar, which is then here in the top left, one-click shortcut to close all the tabs you might have open. As I now continue with some of the next report in our example here. All right. Give me just a second here to find this relational one we have. Okay, as I then display and run this report, we see this column currently percent of sales. Now, most organizations, the entire column here is just percent of sales. But in our example and robust product capability is I can change the denominator based on my different rows or sections of the report. Like you see here, these sales where you see 100%, each of these lines is divisible by net sales. However, in contrast, all of my expenses, instead of being based on percent of sales, which I could have, we wanted to demonstrate where I can change the base row or denominator. Because now, once I get to the expense area, I want these expenses as percent of total expenses. And two key concepts for this report. The first is in the column. All right. Here is in columns, this column right here, I'm even just going to call it month to date. Versus here, I'm going to call it year to date. Key concept, whenever you have formulas, your formulas reference codes. And it looks like someone might have inserted another column here because I don't want you to confuse column B with the code A. That's why I relabeled it. And when I did so, it also relabeled the formula for me. So here's my month to date column. And the single and primary rule for formulas is you put your code in square bracket. The main reason why is because also you can use numerics in your formula, like times 2 divided by 100, whatever. So I'm basically taking my month to date data, dividing by. Now, second key rule of formulas, after the first one being placing your code in square brackets, is we have two automatic formulas inside the system. One we're currently seeing here, what's called @DPR, and that acronym really stands for divide by a percent row. DPR, divide by a percent row. Now, I have to go inside my line set to define what the percent row is. At minimum, maybe one row like sales, but in my example, I did multiple rows, like the sales top section by sales or the lower section by total expense. Now, the second code, we also have one what's called @period. And inside this column, I'm going to even hit the F1 button. Now, the F1 button is a universal Windows key that pulls up the online help. And then here is a great little web online help Web meaning we're updating this frequently as new features and functionality and feedback come. It automatically knew when I hit the F1 button, it knew where I was inside the tool within my column fields, so I could look at related topics down below. And then also in my little index or search here, I mentioned there was one called @DPR, like divide by percent row. And there's also one what's called @period, because this latter one, and that's really the only two codes that are maybe Prospero unique. Otherwise, all the other formulas are algebraic or Excel-like. And then period one is really, if I wanted to run the report for period 6, I divide by period 6 for an average. Or if I ran the report for period 7, divide by period 7, because many people like to see an average run rate or something. So a couple other key concepts, maybe the F1 online help, index search of those two codes. Now let me return back to the column. We saw key concept number 1 in our column definition, dividing it by this @DPR. Now our second step required is in the line set where we define what that base denominator or percent row is. So I'll just go back to the report that I rendered and ran. My earlier shortcut was going to the column. Now I'm simply going to the line set. At minimum, I need at least one row that defines what my percent row is. Usually we put it at the top because thereafter, all the rows below would be shown a percent of that. But here is our ability and demonstration before I get to expenses, where here's where I'm linking to the general ledger accounts, wildcarded or ranges for that. I want to change the base row. And I could add as many of these little DPRs. So therefore, all of these expenses divisible by total expense, where I changed it. All right, cool. Easy, powerful, going full circle. There is our percent row or report. Let me peek in case any questions came in. We probably have approximately 15 to 20 minutes remaining in today's session. I don't see any questions in the queue. Okay. Otherwise, let me continue on some expanded segments, as I generically call it. Now, I'm going to start with a more simple and widely used example, and I'll show you a little bit second example thereafter. I'm going to go back to the earlier budget versus actual report, because hopefully you're utilizing summary accounts and expanding to avoid and reduce report maintenance, like whenever a new general ledger revenue expense come in. Now, when I render this report, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show hidden columns. And simply what I'm doing is I'm showing the account number to the left or not. That's a very simple example. Maybe another common example is, how about this is actual year to date, but maybe I want to show the months or the quarters of the year. So that way I can have a report that has my cake and eat it too, because maybe me, the accountant, I want to see the account number, but maybe my managers or board members do not want to see it. So you can easily then have one report, where a lot of times past you had to have multiple reports accomplishing that. As I scroll downward, here's the key row and concept, where I'm utilizing a summary account that I can name anything that I want. We called it EXPN. Above this row, I'm showing all the detail of every single account. And let's look to the line set. Well, visually, it looks like there's about 50 expense lines, etc., that have value and data. But in my setup and design, all we need is one single row. Well, I could do things old-fashioned way, like the old Microsoft FX and Manager Portal way that most of you came from, individually listing the wildcard. But nope, the better, efficient Prospero way is using a summary account. Now, in this account pick list, let me at least just show you that this is all my chart of accounts, because here might be accounts that begin with a 10 for, let's say, my cash or other general ledger accounts. But what I'm showing you is a graphical view of those. So here in the lower left, most organizations only need one reporting tree. But in our example, we have a couple different ones, because maybe in my cash flow budgeting, which if you join me on the session this afternoon, I'll share with you, or even the cash flow reporting, maybe I want cash defined a little bit differently. maybe excluding depreciation or bonus, which maybe is a non-cash item. But let me focus here on just this primary tree for net income, which usually also includes balance sheets as well. But there's my expense node. And then in my tree, I have a nice easy range. All these expense accounts, or in other words, whenever I add a new general ledger account, I do not have to do anything. One is Prospero automatically grabs and throws that into our account segment worksheet automatically. Secondly, my tree, I do not have to update my tree when I'm using ranges and wildcards. And third and finally, I do not have to update this line set, which is yes, used for report being my focus, but also this line set could be used for the budgeting side for those. I see a couple of that signed up for the session a little bit later today. Now, I also like to go full circle, just showing you behind the scenes, if you're unfamiliar with these trees, where you set up or maintain them. Under trees, let me start at least with the company first and foremost, because notice here we have company 1, 2, 3, and 9. And this tree automatically created and maintained. I'll just close that out. Let's go then to our trees for the account segment. Net income. As I expand some other nodes of the tree, I can use ranges or wildcards. I can also double click to see that range initially. Even I can exclude, because maybe this might be an oddball account that I want as a separate section or line in my report. And if I do ever exclude an account, it'll say with the exceptions. I double click that and there's my range. Sometimes ranges could be from this account to that account, or sometimes a range could be maybe all accounts that begin with a 4 down below. Or even better yet, there might be instances where maybe in my chart of accounts, any account that ends with a 5 might be an elimination account, or it might be depreciation. So we can either wildcard the prefix, suffix, or in between. Very, very flexible, because all the Microsoft products did not allow that. Also, a lot of times you have missing and duplicates that this system catches for us automatically. Now, final note on these trees I'll make, because there's a few other cool reports I want to share, is I want to see where I'm utilizing this summary account. So here's my expenses. I'm going to go now full circle. I'm going to right click on top of the summary node of my tree. Where is it used? And then now you're going to see a long list. There's maybe different reports of income statements, balance sheets, etc. And if I change my mind, usually if I change my reporting structure, like let's call it a PPP loan for COVID, I just maybe update my tree and then it may automatically flow through when I'm using this summary accounts and expansion. Now that last little phrase, I want to be sure I'm clear with. I was emphasizing the summary account, and then here's maybe 2 final fields or maybe 3 to be aware of. I can show the account detail above or below the summary account. What 0 means, it means every individual account, but I could say, and let me give you a graphical example of this, I could, for my cost of goods sold, I could say, show me 1 level down. And in this example, if I said, show me 1 level down, it might be lines for labor and material, or maybe overhead. But 0 means every individual account, or otherwise I can type in a 1, 2, or 3 based on the levels you have in your tree. And finally, this line set or row definition, and most lines, only report on the natural account. And then here in the expanded segments, be aware of this field. Yeah, the system knows natural only. And now what I'm going to segue to is there might be some line sets where I have multiple segments contained within it. And let me see if I can find that. This is a little bit off script here, but I think I should be able to find that pretty quickly here. All right. We saw earlier, as I'm just recapping, the first report, I toggle between department A, B, C. Or one of the second reports, what we call side by side, is in the column I was showing departments, but there might be instances where I want to show different segments expanded. And let me even just look at this departmental one. Let me now run the report. And this is sort of what I call the third flavor in quote unquote departmental reporting. Instead of being a report filter or secondly side by side in a column, I'm now expanding my departmental data in my lines. What we're seeing here is not accounts like our last report for income statement. We're now seeing departments. I'll call that department 1, 2, 3, 4. And really we're just analyzing maybe expenses for simplicity. And let's look now to the line set. And here is, instead of having the natural, like we saw in our last line set, we're now expanding on department. But what I could have done is say expand on both the natural and department, or whatever the case be. So if I do include multiple segments in my line set, and if I'm expanding, just be aware of this field once again. That, yeah, you could either expand on a single or multiple segments, depending on, again, if you have a single or multiple segments you've turned on for the report. All right, let me now wrap up with that little expansion example, or examples plural. Okay, how about on one of the next reports, I want to look at a statement of cash flow report. This gets a little bit more involved in some of the formulas, but we can definitely automate this. If there's any lines in your cash flow report you're not able to break out by simple general ledger balance changes, like account number 1, 2, sometimes what we do is we import data via Excel in any way, shape, or form. Meaning, in my cash flow report, how about I have a general ledger account called fixed assets, but only have one account called fixed assets? In other words, I do not have two accounts for acquisitions and disposals. Or notes payable. Maybe I only have one general ledger account, but maybe I have two separate lines of my cash flow for notes payable payments or proceeds, meaning loans coming in. So here in the Excel import, I'll just leave it as a sort of bullet point note that we can import into this data warehouse again almost any data imaginable. Actuals, budgets, statistics. Okay, good. I think I plugged that maybe a third time today to definitely leverage, as I see most organizations not taking advantage of their stats or key performance indicators. Let me open up the cash flow report. We have a nice example here. And we're going to look to maybe two key concepts. One would be in our column definition. I'm going to look at the more standard way to do this report, even though there might be a second or third way to do it. Now, in this statement of cash flow report, this column to the left is my monthly change in cash. Or here to the right is my year-to-date change in cash. However, if I come up here and click on this button to show hidden columns, notice for the year-to-date, we actually have two columns we commonly utilize. This one to the left is my year-to-date beginning. This one to the right is my year-to-date end. And this column shows me the net change. Now let me rephrase that. Even I'm going to take one step back. This is just really accounting 101. On a balance sheet, which this is not, but on a balance sheet, I want to grab year-to-date ending values. But let's focus on this monthly December column. I want the net change of these accounts. So instead of year-to-date, as I now open up the column, we simply have periodic data, meaning monthly net change. Now, before I continue to the right, let me add one additional key concept to support. Let's say at the beginning of the month, my accounts receivable was $200. At the end of the month, my accounts receivable was $300. So on my balance sheet, my accounts receivable was $300. But when it went from $200 to $300 in the month, my net change for the month was a positive $100. My receivable grew from $200 to $300. However, instead of a positive $100 change from $200 to $300, my receivables increased, which means people are not paying me. So instead of a positive source of cash, it's a negative use of cash. So the key concept, I'll jump immediately to the punchline on, is in my line set, I could globally reverse the sign of the accounts, which is one common way for most income statements and balance sheets, but In our statement of cash flow report, a lot of times we might want to more granularly turn on and off the reverse sign using this field here that I'm just going to turn them on sort of randomly, because there might be an add back item like depreciation where maybe I do not want to reverse a sign. So just being aware of this field, we oftentimes utilize in our statement of cash flow. Now, normally this reverse sign can accomplish what we need. However, there might be instances in my formula I might want to multiply by -1. Use this ladder technique, not needed, but there's some maybe exceptions based on your general ledger postings. That might be another technique we utilize. Otherwise, all these other lines are simply changes of accounts, like receivables, using my example from before. Or maybe I create a new statistic account. Let me just do one little side step. Under segments, these are automatically read from your general ledger, so I never have to touch or worry about them. But I'm going to come inside my natural account, and here at the very bottom, I can create statistics in a matter of seconds here. So I'm just going to create one here called Z104. This is Derek's statistic account, stat account. And then I could either import data into that, or I can budget immediately to that, which I'll take that a few steps further in our budgeting session later today for those that signed up for that. All right, so I'm in the segments area, natural, I added it, but then in my budgeting side, maybe I'm proposing a new company, or maybe that elimination company we maybe just acquired, or I'm doing eliminations offline. I could have done the same thing here in the company. I'm going to create a new company 4 as my test. I'm now going to save that. And now immediately whenever I run any report here, as I'm going to rerun this cash flow report, I then have a company filter I can immediately see here. So there's the automatic all tree, automatically 4 is included. And that might be a new budget guy or maybe someone we just acquired. So awesome. And there's a punchline of maybe a 5-minute, 10-minute illustration I'll do in the budgeting session later today. All right, let me close out a couple of things here. Let me just delete that so I don't throw some people off, as it looks like someone threw me off on 1 or 2 little minor things today. Last key concept I want to look to is back in the cash flow report is our column and maybe one more precise formula we might need, what I call a single cell formula. Now back to our column definition, but let's look behind the scenes on it. I was mentioning to accomplish our year-to-date, we need really 3 columns. Respectively, from left to the right is our year-to-date beginning. Notice the year-to-date versus monthly periodic to the left on both of these. But period 0, that just means our year-to-date beginning. Or otherwise, year-to-date for whatever period I run it, like if I ran it for period 6 June or period 7 July, it would automatically grab that ending amount. And then here is what I call the net change, taking D, like David, my ending amount, minus C, my beginning. And then really we have 2 columns that are printing because these 2 are not. They're always suppressed. And then the final key concept we're going to look to is in our line set. We might have a formula that's only needed on maybe 1 or 2 rare rows at the bottom where I'm bringing in beginning and ending cash. So as I look back to the line set, and this also circles in some other concept we saw earlier on one of our reports, because one of the last reports I showed you was we had some beginning balances at the top of the report and we had some year-to-date ending at the very bottom. Now let me at least look at maybe 1 or 2 rows here to conclude with. Like here's my cash accounts, but for the statement of cash flow, I want the beginning cash. And then looking here to the right, we have a little check mark here that says, oh, grab the beginning. And then additionally, here is, we have one particular formula because our 2 printing columns, now rarely, I'll even take one step back, I'm looking really at the formula field. Let me show you the norm. The norm is never really do I have to worry about this pop-up window. But when I do, at least on the reporting side, is if my formula does not apply to all column. This asterisk And up above reads, hey, this asterisk means my formula will affect all columns. But nope, maybe in column B versus column E, respectively, where my beginning of the month column or E, maybe I want a different formula. And whenever you refer to a specific column from your column definition, then your syntax thereafter in your formula field would be your column dot your line. And of course, that main rule to repeat, always your codes, in this case, column B code or the row code or line code called cache, always your code in square brackets. But once again, that's my column code dot my line code, because we just have to add this one formula for our beginning and then cache. Otherwise, it maybe mistakenly nets it out from the column where I had that year-to-date beginning and ending. And last thought related to this key concept is whenever I'm doing a little bit more precise formulas like this example, and even I have some nice little training documentation I can provide if you don't have the training and user guides, jot down my email, which I'll pull up here in just a second. The last little note to make on this cash flow report is what we call calculation priority. We saw in the line set some different formulas. We saw in our column different formulas, and what the Microsoft products do, and also Prospero as the default, is it does your line formula first and then the column secondly. And then in the statement of cash flow, in some reports, we might want to change the calculation order. On back of the report, like where we define the line and the column, on the options tab, here's the default, lines first, but in the cash flow report, we want to change that. We want to calculate our column first, where I calculate my year-to-date change, but then secondly, I want to calculate that line formula where maybe I corrected one value that was maybe incorrect from my column formula. All right, usually I don't like to end with a little cash flow report that gets a little bit more involved, but it's very simple and easy, and I have some nice little cheat sheet notes I can pass along thereafter. So here is where I'll finish up. I'll look quickly at the question and answer. There's my email information if you have any follow-up questions, and just in case any questions came in the queue, looks like not, but otherwise, a big thank you for everybody joining us today. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll probably send out a thank you reminder here in the days to follow. Maybe give me 2 or 3 days along with the recording that we'll be putting out to our website. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day and happy holidays ahead. Goodbye.